all to find your seats if you can. I'm thrilled to see so many of you here this evening. I'm going to riff for just a minute while you try to find some seats. I know it's tough because there's so many people on the aisles, so I'm going to hang out for just a second while you find your way to your seats. I'm Reverend Jamie Michaels. I'm the senior pastor at Old South United Methodist Church here in Reading. We're the big white church underneath the bell tower. And together with the team from Reading Embraces Diversity, I'm delighted to welcome you here this evening. I want to thank you all for making time in your busy schedules to be here for this important space, this space of listening and learning. I want to thank Reading Community Television for being here tonight. And I want to thank them especially for filming this event so that what we talk about here tonight can be made accessible for our whole town, even folks who can't be here with us tonight. But I do want you all to know that if you came here tonight hoping to raise a question or a comment and you don't want your face or your voice to be on film, there will be an opportunity for you to submit that question or comment and have someone else read it without your identity being disclosed. I want to tell you that I'm here tonight because over the past few months, we have seen evidence that our world, and indeed our town, does not reflect the fullness of compassion and appreciation for one another's diversity, of which I believe we are capable. I am here because I want a safer, more understanding world for myself, for my neighbors, and for my family. I am here because I know that my own experience reflects only a small part of the experience of our town, and that we need many voices in order to sing our song fully. I hope that you have come tonight with a similar spirit, not first to argue and accuse, but to listen and to learn from one another, and to understand our town more deeply. We did not anticipate that we would gather this evening in the wake of another horrendous incident of gun violence in our country. I know that many of your hearts, like mine, are aching and torn over images and stories from Las Vegas this week. In times like these, we often offer our thoughts and prayers to those who suffer violence. In my own tradition, my scriptures instruct me to pray without ceasing. And I'm reminded of Frederick Douglass, a slave-turned-abolitionist who said, "I prayed for freedom for 20 years, but I received no answer until I prayed with my legs." I hope that our grief over this latest tragedy will move not only our thoughts and our prayers, but also our actions towards making safer communities. And I am grateful to all of you who, regardless of your faith background, have chosen to express your care and concern for the safety of Reading and all of its residents by being here with us this evening, by praying with your feet, by thinking with your feet this evening. I invite you now to join me in welcoming the Reading High School Mixed Choir as they begin our evening with an offering of hope and peace.
So
Thank you, choir. Y'all, we have a full night ahead of us, and I want to give you a picture of what's in store. I'm grateful to welcome Dr. Anna Ornstein, our esteemed guest speaker, to whom I will introduce you in just a moment, and who will set the tone for our time together. I know you will have questions for her and for many of our panelists this evening. You were given an index card and a pencil as you entered. I want to encourage you to write down your questions as they occur to you so that you can remember them or so that you can submit them to be read or asked on your behalf. After we hear from Dr. Ornstein, you will hear prepared statements from our town manager, Mr. Bob LaLasher, and our superintendent of schools, John Doherty, about those offices' response to anti-Semitism and racism and the direction being set by those institutions. You'll then have a chance to listen and share with those speakers, plus Chief of Police Mark Segala, myself, and Mr. Norman Abbott, Assistant Regional Director of the Anti-Defamation League of New England, who will help to ground our conversations in respectful dialogue. We may not get to all of your questions tonight, as there are a number of you here, but we will provide a way for you to continue to be in dialogue as we move forward. And then at the end, the choir will lead us in song again as we leave. All before 9 p.m., I am going to work to hold us to that deadline. I'm thrilled and grateful that our State Senator Jason Lewis is able to be here with us tonight in this important conversation. Thank you so much, Jason, for being here. We're also joined this evening by members of the Reading Clergy Association who have been part of these conversations for several months and who are here in support of tonight's events. I especially wanted to welcome Rabbi Susan Abramson, who had very much wanted to be here, but at the last minute had to go home and take care of her son who is sick tonight. And so we want to keep her and her family in our thoughts tonight. I want to welcome Reverend Lisa Stedman and Renee Manning, who are here from First Congregational United Church of Christ. We have a little bit of a fan club here. Father Steve Rock, who's here from St. Agnes Catholic Church. Reverend Hank Purse and Liz Weber from the Unitarian Universalist Church of Reading. And Reverend Carol Van Buskirk, who is my co-pastor at Old South United Methodist Church. And Rabbi Abramson has joined us. We're so glad that you're here this evening, Rabbi. I want to tell you that Reverend Kyung Yu, who is pastor at the Korean Church of the Nazarene, wanted to be here with you but had a prior commitment. He wants to tell you that his church is very much in support of the work that you all and we all are doing here tonight. I want you to know that these clergy are here for you. These are your clergy. Whether you are a member of our faith tradition or of no faith tradition whatsoever, we are here as resources for you at any time, tonight or going forward in the future, to reflect and to ask questions. We are here if you need us. And so the clergy who are here tonight will be collecting any index cards that you wish to submit this evening. So if you have a question that you don't want to ask yourself, or you don't want your face on TV or your voice on TV tonight, the clergy will be collecting those index cards. If you have questions for them, you can ask them. If you want to submit something because you want it answered later, or you have a comment for us tonight, you can give those to the clergy as well. And I want to encourage you to use them as a resource at any time going forward. And I want to thank the clergy for your willingness to be here tonight in support of this event. Members of our select board are here with us tonight. I saw a few of you, but in order not to leave anyone out, if you are here tonight, you're a member of our select board, will you wave a hand? Thank you so much, those of you who are here. I want to thank you all for taking time out of what I know are hectic and stressful schedules to listen to the voices of your constituents. I hope that you will find this evening fruitful and instructive. And I want to express my deep thanks to the Human Relations Advisory Committee under the leadership of Heather McLean. Many of our volunteers who are here tonight came to us through their involvement with HRAC. Our goals and our values are similarly aligned, and we so appreciate your help and support there. At this time, I would invite our panel to come join us on the stage. Join me on the stage. And as they come forward, I would like to tell you about our guest speaker this evening. It is my great honor to welcome her tonight. Dr. Anna Ornstein is Professor Emerita of Child Psychiatry at the University of Cincinnati and lecturer in psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. She is an expert in childhood trauma, and in many ways, she has made it her life's work to help others to understand, cope with, and transform the experience of their trauma and difficult life circumstances. Her compassion and her understanding of the suffering of others come through really clearly in her stunning writing. Perhaps a part of that understanding was born out of her having experienced firsthand the hatred and betrayal of many in her native Hungary during Hitler's rise to power. Growing up during a time of rising anti-Semitism in Hungary, Dr. Ornstein and her family saw a society become more and more accustomed to the derogatory and vile treatment of its own. Through imprisonment in multiple forced labor and death camps, Dr. Ornstein survived and went on to return to Germany and finish medical school. Now she uses her own life experience, as well as her many years as a child psychiatrist, to help future generations understand those years in order that we might never again be complicit in such a genocide. She is a frequent speaker at schools and universities and the author of numerous articles and books, including her memoir, My Mother's Eyes, which I'm reading now and would highly recommend to you. Dr. Ornstein will be with us just a few minutes this evening, but I want you to mark your calendars for November 29th when she'll be coming back to Reading to visit with us again. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Anna Ornstein.
A little too early with your applause. I have to deliver something. I'm looking for my glasses. Here, it's here. I promise. Now I can thank you for the welcome, a little bit more formally, and also thank you for having invited me. People are always thanking me for coming. I think that is because they think I'm old and it may be extra work and I will get tired. That is maybe true. However, I get a great deal of pleasure out of meeting people who are interested in very important subjects. And I experience these invitations as an honor to me. So, Linda, that's you. I have to thank you. She's really the one made this happen, I believe. I wasn't supposed to say that. I can't open the water. I knew it would be trouble. You've been so helpful. No, I don't need it. No, I really don't. I did prepare something, though all what you will hear from me is very much in my heart, so I could or should be able to say it without it. Over the many years that I was asked to speak to school children about my experiences in the Holocaust, there was one question that always came up in our discussion. Dr. Ornstein, could it happen here? What happened to you? The question was asked after I told them how, after German troops occupied Hungary in 1944, my mother, my father, my grandmother, and members of our extended family were taken to Auschwitz, which is, as you may know, an extermination camp, where my father and all the others, except my mother and myself, were murdered. By then, my two brothers, ages 20 and 22, I was 17 at the time, were in forced labor battalions where they perished. They did not return. In the past, when the children asked the question whether or not it would happen in this country, what happened in Europe, I did not hesitate with my answer. I reminded them that we live in a multi-ethnic, multi-religious country, that we have a document, the Constitution, that is to safeguard the democratic principles by which this country was established and has been governed, that no one person or party could become so powerful as to oppress individuals or discriminate and persecute people on the basis of religion or ethnicity. Yes, there continues to be discrimination and prejudice. Ours is not a perfect union, but the country as a whole has been moving in the direction of tolerance and acceptance of differences. With many obstacles in the way and with a great deal of effort, progress had been made to integrate public schools, to assure voting rights and human rights. In this country, we never had federally sponsored wholesale persecutions and discriminations against minorities. And in my opinion, this is the most important distinguishing feature between America and Germany in the 1930s and 1940s. Systematic persecution, stripping Jews and Gypsies and other of their citizenship, and then the industrialized killing of these people, along with homosexuals and Jehovah's Witnesses, was not only permitted by the National Socialist regime, but it was one of its leading policies. Anyone found helping these minorities was punished and in some cases executed. With time, there was some organized resistance against these political developments, but much too late to make a substantive difference. Now, after last year's election, when asked if it could happen in this country, what happened to me and to my family, I could no longer be so quick with my reassuring comments. No, we are not, and I'm sure we will never be, where Germany was in the 30s and 40s. But nor can I say that we have no reason to worry. Now, when I'm asked the question whether or not it can happen here, I like to discuss with the children the fragility of the democratic system of government. I myself find it important to know what are those factors that can undermine a democracy. The outcome of the presidential election did not create the conditions that exposed the weaknesses in our system of government. I believe that it was the recognition that climate change is man-made, making it mandatory to seek alternate sources of energy to coal, and the technological advances causing unemployment in large segments of the working class population had created income inequality, which in turn created a great deal of anger, and now anger needs a target. We need scapegoats. The country was ready, this is my belief, to elect a president who promised to turn the clock back and secure employment and adequate income for everyone, a promise that I think he would have a very hard time to keep. This time, the scapegoats were the immigrants. They are the ones, and not the advance in technology or the climate change, that are supposed to be responsible for unemployment and whatever other problems the country has to deal with. It is still hard to know what the politicians currently in power have in mind for this country. But we have already witnessed executive orders for deportation that has been tearing families apart and emboldening latent hatred toward all minorities, Muslims, Jews, and all people of color. The way I see the problem, there are two main areas where the greatest harm could come to our democracy. One, the courts, should they lose their neutrality, if they should buckle on their political partisan demands. And the other danger is that the press may lose its freedom, and the news reporting could no longer be trusted, and that is, I think, happening. We are fearfully watching for the next incident that indicates that the law of the land is being circumvented, and the Twitter messages assaulting free and independent press. Not respecting the law and making a concentrated effort to undermine the credibility of a free press are, in my view, the greatest dangers to our democracy. Those of us who are watching this pattern unfolding with great concern, we ask ourselves, what can those of us who care about human rights and free speech do to stop these developments before it is too late? The greatest danger is to do nothing. Dismissing Hitler as a madman who could never achieve the goal of euthanasia, I hope you all know what that means, namely to kill the physically and the mentally handicapped children and adults, was the first mistake the population of Germany had made. As we now know, after that, every thread in the democratic fabric of society began to erode rapidly. In this country, many people still wonder whether painting swastikas on bathroom floors and seriously damaging the New England Holocaust Memorial really indicates an increase to anti-Semitism. These are, many would say, pranks children are committing who may not know the significance of what they had done. I suggest that the young people who did these acts may not know the significance. However, those who look at them, who look at these signs, get the message. Swastikas are symbols of hate, and symbols are powerful methods of communication. Timothy Snyder, the Yale historian, put it well, and I like to read this one sentence very slowly. The symbols of today enable the reality of tomorrow. Do not look away and do not get used to them. When the divisive words of the president are dismissed or explained away that he really did not mean what he said about the torch-carrying hate groups in Charlottesville, we are asked to normalize a piece of behavior that ought to be unacceptable in this country. The normalization and acceptance of even the smallest incursion into our democratic ideals have to be taken very seriously. Swastikas and words out of the mouths of important people, certainly of a president, are like matches. They ignite the latent hate born out of bitterness at one's fate in life. In the 1930s, there was no popular resistance to the initial signs of an authoritarian regime that soon became a tyranny in Germany. Whatever resistance emerged eventually, it was too late to stop the initial entry of racial and religious hatred into everybody's everyday life. It came through the radio, it came through propaganda. And more people were convinced of Hitler's right, that the Jews were indeed the reason for the loss of the First World War and what had befallen the country in terms of the economic woes, unemployment that, as you know, came eventually to a global depression in 1929. I would say that history does not repeat itself, but we learn a great deal from history. It can instruct us. When resistance eventually was established in Germany, it was really too late. But those who promote hate may not realize that hate does not only destroy the other, the one against whom the hate is directed, but hate also destroys the hating person and the hating nation. This too is obvious when we look back on the 20th century and realize that both hateful countries that were bent on destruction and revenge destroyed themselves. The Third Reich ceased to exist after 12 years, and the Soviet Union lasted a little longer, but after 72 years, it was over for them as well. This is the reason that I am so excited about this future organization. Reading embraces diversity. I am excited because it is responsive to signs of hatred with a clear message. This community is declaring its commitment to our democratic ideals by insisting that they will not quietly look on while racial and religious hatred tears its members apart. I am also very hopeful for this organization because in my view, it is on the right side of progress and it is expressive of the nobler side of human nature which strives toward love your neighbor as you love yourself. The word embrace states its mission. Embracing something or someone is more than tolerating another. I was listening to commentators this morning, reflecting on the horrible massacre in Las Vegas. They were talking about how people under those dreadful conditions try to help each other. They spoke about there being more good than evil in this country, and I could not agree more. Totally in agreement with that. However, there will always be evil. Whether politically motivated or secondary to emotional problems, we will always be challenged to look out for signs of discrimination, prejudice, and hate before these sentiments overtake larger and larger segments of our communities. And it is this kind of vigilance that is definitely upon us. And this is why I'm so grateful you are doing what you're doing. Thank you so much.
Well, Dr. Ornstein, perhaps I will not say thank you to you then. But I'm so glad to have you as a friend and partner in this work. I'm so glad that you do the work that you do and that it strengthens the work that we're doing here. And I'm deeply appreciative to you and to Linda for your work in setting this up for us tonight. I know that you will all have questions for Dr. Ornstein, and I hope that you have written them down so you don't forget them. I would like to invite Mr. Bob Lasher and then following him, Superintendent John Doherty to give some remarks to help us to understand how our town institutions are working together to respond to incidents of anti-Semitism and racial hatred.
The toughest act to follow yet. Thank you, Dr. Ornstein. The positions of school superintendent, police chief, and town manager require some vastly different skills and are typically enhanced by very different life experiences. However, each has significant responsibility towards the physical and emotional well-being of our members of our community. In our peer communities, you may well find individuals who take a different approach to these three positions. But Reading residents should be assured of two things. First, we three care deeply and work very hard to accomplish our responsibilities, and we do that as diligently as any group of three peer community leaders. Second, we work together better than any group of leaders, and we each know this fact from constant feedback from our peers in other communities. As we like to say, we are one Reading. We welcome differences of opinion in our community. We each treasure and protect free speech. However, all three of us equally do not condone nor welcome extremists that seek to spread discord and inspire violence. We abhor those that would divide us, whether through acts of symbolism such as graffiti or acts of physical violence. In Reading during the past few months, months, we have seen specific hurtful and hateful symbols and words aimed at the Jewish religion, at African Americans, and at sexual identity or orientation. To be clear, these symbols and words, plus all they stand for, are not the least bit welcome in our community. They are not okay. These acts have begun to divide the community between those that see the graffiti as a form of harmless, attention-seeking pranks, typically done by kids, to those that see terror through these words and symbols of hate. Last March, as part of the annual budget process, I stepped clearly outside the bounds of my position when I wrote these words to our town meeting, quote, "However, to set aside the near-term financial challenges for a moment, there's an issue of deep concern to me and some of my peer mayors and managers. The fragile and decaying civility in public discourse, certainly influenced by national politics. We see divides in our communities forming. If one looks carefully, they are actually not easy to label or describe, let alone to find a way to bridge. Some of that came out in Reading during our community listening and senior tax relief sessions last summer, when different groups of residents selfishly opposed each other, and this behavior has continued in different local forums since. Some residents seem bent on winning a debate as if it is a contest, instead of sitting down as a community to find common ground and solutions," end quote. This was last March. Unfortunately, we still seem to be on that downward path as a community and broadly as a society. Last Thursday, I had the opportunity to attend a meeting in Devens, sponsored by the Massachusetts Municipal Management Association. Foxborough Police Chief William Baker spoke to about 20 town managers about race, justice, and the use of force in 2017. We were the very first non-law enforcement group in the country to see some chilling footage of interviews of cop killers in prison who spoke about hunting down police officers proactively. They did so simply because the officer might take away their freedom. Chief Baker also showed clips of African Americans being, in his own words, assassinated by U.S. law enforcement officers in other parts of the country. He spoke of his experience in 40 different countries, and he brought a wealth of different perspectives to the difficult issues at hand. One simple message I took away from that experience was the idea of 99%. It was actually remarkable to hear convicted murderers, families of victims of horrific acts of pure hatred, police officers and bystanders each say that 99% of all people, without regard to race, religion, sexual preference, or country of origin, are good, but all worried to varying degrees about the 1% that were not good. Some then extrapolated that worry into fear and often into split-second violence. Last Thursday night, the Reading Coalition Against Substance Abuse held their annual meeting here, and featured speakers included Middlesex District Attorney Marion Ryan and Dr. Ruth Pote. DA Ryan explored the wonderful job that my two colleagues do in the successful strategies to discourage our youth from falling into life of substance abuse, all while giving them a clear diversion path with second chances, but with firm responsibilities. In this regard, Reading is held out as a model community in Massachusetts. There is no doubt in my mind that our CASA, working collaboratively with the schools and police, has saved lives. The only doubt might be how many, and you should all be very proud of that. Dr. Pote is nationally recognized as an expert in family and addiction medicine. She spoke forcefully yet humorously about how addiction is the only brain disease that is 100% preventable. She gave alarming scientific evidence about how decisions made between ages 12 and 18, a time of great peer pressure and vulnerability, will irreversibly change one's future. The juxtaposition of my two Thursday meetings made it abundantly clear that the phrase harmless attention-seeking prank does not fit the recent graffiti incidents in Reading. They say the longest journey begins with a single step, and when it comes to acts of intolerance and hate, we must all do whatever we can to prevent that first step from ever happening with our young people. All across the world, we see acts of division. Horrific acts of terrorism are now almost a weekly event. Evidence the weekend stabbings in Marseille, France. Acts of global civil war have begun. On Sunday, Spanish National Riot Police were ordered into Catalonia because local police would not enforce anti-referendum directives. The motives of the heartbreaking Las Vegas shooting remain unclear. From my position as town manager, I will continue to work diligently and collaboratively with Dr. Doherty and Chief Segala. Together, we cannot influence national or international events. However, we can, and we must, work with the help of the entire community to ensure that all our students, our residents, our businesses, and our visitors, each and every one of them, has the safest town we can provide in an increasingly complex world. In retrospect, perhaps the three of us were slow to react to that early May discovery of the first graffiti incident. But I can assure you that since we learned of the second incident at the scene of a pipe bomb scare over near Joshua Eaton one night, we recognized the seriousness of the situation. Since then, all three of us have been all in, working together. I'd like to now introduce Superintendent Dr. John Doherty, who will describe the school's efforts to try to prevent students from taking that first step in a journey towards a lifetime of intolerance and hatred. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. First and foremost, I want to thank Red for sponsoring tonight's event. I look forward to having the Reading Public Schools be part of a bigger conversation moving forward in our community on this critical issue. I also want to thank our RMHS Mixed Choir, who's sitting in the front row, under the direction of Kristen Killian. I know it's a school night, and really appreciate you being here for providing the beautiful music this evening. I want to reemphasize the point that Bob made about the strong collaboration between the Reading Public Schools and the Reading Police Department. This relationship, which has only grown stronger over the last several years, is built on communication, trust, and a sense of purpose to keep our students and staff safe. We've been very fortunate in this community to have strong leadership at the chief level, with Chief Cormier and now Chief Segala, and exceptional school resource officers who understand their role in a school setting. This type of relationship is not necessarily the norm in some communities, and I want to thank the Chief for his leadership in helping to provide safe schools. Before I talk about moving forward and what we are doing now as a school district, I do want to reflect for a moment on the past several months. When we first began having the swastika and other hate graffiti incidents last April, I was not satisfied with my response as superintendent. I wanted to understand and learn more about how we could do a better job responding to the community. At the time, Bob mentioned to me that he had reached out to Rabbi Susan Abramson from Temple Shalom Emet in Burlington. I met and communicated with Rabbi Abramson on several occasions, and she shared with me her experiences in Bedford a few years ago and how that community responded. I also reached out to the Bedford School Superintendent, John Sills, who shared with me the details of the plans that he and the police chief implemented when Bedford was going through a similar series of hate graffiti. Upon Rabbi Abramson's recommendation, Deputy Chief Clark and I met in late June with about 40 members of the Reading Jewish community, some who currently have students in our schools, and some who no longer have students in the Reading Public Schools. There were also current students who attended that session. We wanted to update them on what was going on, but more importantly, to listen to their concerns, their thoughts, and their fears. The conversation we had that evening was impactful. Many in the group were very nervous and concerned, not only what is happening in Reading, but what is happening in our country. And this was before the riots in Charlottesville. Some had grandparents who survived the Holocaust. They were told the stories about how this horrific time in our history started and how people did not respond or push back. And then it was too late. They talked about how important it is for schools to teach our students to be an upstander, someone who stands up against bullying or mean, cruel behavior. They emphasized the need to mobilize the entire community to end harmful harassment, teasing, and violence in our schools. Those conversations motivated me to really reflect, along with our principals and central office administrators, at what we were currently doing and what we could do differently. To that end, I want to share with you some of the areas that we've been working on as a school district, both prior to the graffiti incidents and moving forward. First, our schools take pride in the core values that we have developed and practiced for the past few years around the areas of respect and responsibility. Each school has developed their own unique culture of supporting these core values through monthly assemblies, guest speakers, their coursework, recognition, and community service. These activities are ongoing and strengthen our school cultures. One example is here at the high school, in that our English classes read the book Night by Elie Wiesel, who writes about his experience with his father in the Nazi German concentration camps. Last year, a Holocaust survivor came to the students after they read the book to talk about his experiences. We've also had Dr. Ornstein come to talk to our 8th grade students, and we plan on inviting her to speak to high school students later on this year. In August, our administrators attended a training session that was facilitated by the Anti-Defamation League to help support the work that we are doing in our schools in this area. During that training, there are 2 areas that really resonated with me. The first was the ADL's explanation of the pyramid of hate, which shows what happens when biased behaviors, when left unchecked, grow in complexities from top to bottom. At first, these behaviors may start with insensitive remarks or stereotyping, but as a society, they can get more and more complex and lead to individual acts of prejudice, discrimination, violence, and if completely left unchecked, genocide. Like a pyramid, the upper levels are supported by the lower levels. If people or institutions treat behaviors on the lower levels as being acceptable or normal, it results in the behaviors the next level become more accepted. The second important point that resonated with me is how we need to respond as adults in our school community when we witness incidents of bias, microaggressions, or bullying. As a district, we've been working on having a consistent response and making these teachable moments for our students. We are communicating the message that these actions do not define us as a school community. As members of the Reading Public Schools, we need to lead and model a culture that embraces a community of safety and respect for our students and adults. Some other activities that we are planning or already are occurring that involve our students include the following. For the first time in several years, we have a World of Difference club at each of our middle schools and at the high school. These after-school clubs, sponsored by the Anti-Defamation League, will lead the student response in creating a culture that promotes respect and embraces diversity. Last year, the club here at the high school created a Reading Memorial High School Human Rights Resolution, which was embraced by staff and students. Recently, under the direction of Assistant Principal Tom Zaya, Reading Memorial High School received what is called the MVP grant in partnership with the New England Patriots and the District Attorney's Office, which will provide training to our student-athlete leaders to promote anti-violence at our high school. We are also very excited that our middle schools have been introducing the curriculum Facing History and Ourselves during their advisory block. This program helps students learn about hatred and bigotry with the intention of stopping these types of incidents from happening in the future. The outcomes of the program foster empathy and reflection, improve students' academic performance, and build safe and inclusive schools. The early results of this program have been very positive from both students and staff. We've also been teaching a course with the same name at the high school for our seniors for several years. We are also proud to be a partner with Understanding Disabilities for over 30 years, and we've been working closely with them to continue to provide lessons at our elementary schools around disability awareness and to bring in a speaker to our middle schools so that students can understand how to work with students with disabilities. On October 21st, we will be holding our first annual Reading Public Schools Parent University, which is being sponsored by the Reading Cooperative Bank. Several of the workshops focus on giving parents the tools and information necessary to support their children in this ever-changing world. We've also improved our internal protocols with administrators, staff, police, for identifying and reporting graffiti so that we have a more unified and rapid response. And finally, on Tuesday, October 24th, several administrators, Lieutenant Rich Abadi and School Resource Officer Brian Lewis, and I will be attending a workshop that is being sponsored by the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Massachusetts Civil Rights Unit. The name of the conference is called Responding to and Preventing Incidents of Hate in K-12 Schools. Some of the topics include preventing hate and creating welcoming schools, best practices in responding to hate speech in schools, addressing the needs of victims, addressing the needs of vulnerable populations, and distinguishing the line between First Amendment free speech and hate speech. As you can see, we've made progress in several areas, including curriculum changes and staff training. However, we know there is always room to improve. We need to develop and continue to enhance our core mission. A core mission which ensures that all students feel safe, have access to quality curriculum, that they are held to a high level of expectation, and that they are provided the support and interventions to continue to grow. Over the last 2 years, our main focus as a school district has been to close the achievement gap for our students. One of the ways you do that is to create a strong learning environment, to create a safe and supportive environment for all students. And when I mean all, I mean students with disabilities, economically disadvantaged students, students who need additional challenges, students of different races and ethnicities, our LGBTQ students, and students who practice different religions. The conversations we are having this evening began in April with the SWAT stickers, the Star of David, unfortunately with a slash through it, and the racist graffiti. But it does not end there. The conversations need to go beyond and focus on how we as a school community can create those safe and supportive schools, and subsequently, a safe and supportive community for all. We are in a time when we are witnessing significant events in our country, our state, and our region, which impact our students and our classrooms. The violence that we have seen over the last several months is just more of those events. The SWAT stickers and other graffiti that we have witnessed in our community is a symptom of what is happening nationally. I want you to know, as the superintendent of the Reading Public Schools, I will not and I do not tolerate hateful words or actions, bigotry, or any form of racist behavior. We will not tolerate this in our classrooms, schools, or on our grounds. There simply is no place for it. We have to be, and we are, better than that. Our work is educating our students, building a stronger and more vibrant community, creating understanding and acting with a sense of positive energy focused on the future of our young people. Although Reading is not a very diverse community in many ways, we are certainly in other ways. We need to embrace and respect those differences, listen respectfully to each other's thoughts, and learn from those conversations. Those conversations will help us better support and teach our students and create a more respectful community. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob and John. And I want to thank also Mark, and I want to thank you especially for the way the three of you have worked together with the clergy and worked together with everyone who has come together over the course of the last few months to be in dialogue and conversation, not only to set up this event, but to talk about ways that we in our town can be moving forward together. We're going to move into our panel discussion now. Our panel is here to listen to you tonight. And to answer as many questions as we're able to. There may be questions tonight that we don't know the answers to, or questions that belong to another department or another official to answer, but we are here to listen. The panel will do the best to answer the questions that can be answered, and if your question can't be answered tonight, Reading Embraces Diversity will work with you to try to find an answer. So we have somebody taking notes this evening, and after the event is over, we will try to direct those questions to the appropriate parties. But you can help us to do that by, if you feel like your question was not answered this evening, or if we didn't have time to get to it, if you can write it down on the index card and give it to us in a basket, that would be really helpful for us at the end of the night. We also encourage you to continue these conversations beyond tonight, and we would love for you to sign up to become more involved with our organization after tonight. So the clergy have 2 microphones placed in the audience, in the aisles, and they'll come around to you in turn. So simply raise your hand if you have a question or a comment. And if you don't wish to read your question or comment, you can either hold your note card up or you can pass it to the end of your row, and a clergy person will collect it and somebody will read it on your behalf. Again, we might not get to all of your questions tonight, but to ensure that we get to as many as possible, oh, hi. I'm going to ask everybody to try to limit your questions and comments to a minute or two apiece. Please be respectful of one another's time. So now I think you've met just about everybody to my right over here, except maybe Chief Segala, if you want to wave. He's the one in uniform. And over here on my left is Mr. Norman Abbott, who is the Assistant Regional Director of the Anti-Defamation League of New England. And he has been working with Chief Segala and Mr. Lalasher over the past several months. He and the ADL have vast experience working with communities like ours, and he's graciously agreed to be with us this evening and lend us his expertise. So to that end, the red team wishes to ask the first question of the evening to him. So, Mr. Abbott, from your experience working with communities who have worked through conflicts that involve anti-Semitism and racism, are there guidelines or best practices that you would suggest we use either tonight or moving forward that would help us to have productive listening and learning?
Thank you very much, Reverend Michaels, and also thank you to Reading Embraces Diversity for sponsoring the event and inviting ADL to speak here today. As Reverend Reverend Michaels said, my name is Norman Abbott, and I'm the Assistant Regional Director for the New England Anti-Defamation League. For those of you that are unfamiliar with ADL, we are a 104-year-old civil rights organization whose mission is to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and to secure justice and fair treatment to all. I was asked here today to discuss how towns can combat hate and bias incidents that occur within a community. As you may know, ADL has seen a spike in such incidents in the last year plus, especially at schools. We've been fortunate to work with Chief Segala, Town Administrator Bob Schur, Superintendent John Doherty, and his staff, all of whom have been incredibly transparent and committed to addressing these issues. While there's no way to completely prevent such incidents, a strong community response like this here today can really help to deter those problems. Simply by being here with members of the Reading Town Government, police, schools, and local leaders, you're already extending a strong message to the rest of the community. Anti-Semitic and racist vandalism are, in my experience, some of the most common types of incidents a town faces. Last year, 63 incidents of anti-Semitic vandalism occurred, compared with 22 the year before. They frequently require little risk by the vandal, and the effort can have a large impact on the community as a whole. On top of this, it can be incredibly difficult to capture or convict the person who's done it, leading to a sense of openness that can really cause issues within a community. Before we start, I want to stress how sensitive these conversations can be. It's important to respect one another. No one person's experience is the same as another, and these types of incidents affect people in different ways. It is imperative not to discount, invalidate, or worse, to shout down someone based on these experiences. When addressing these sorts of issues, it is important that those speaking use I statements and not attack others whose opinion may differ from theirs. Creating an atmosphere of respect, being open to new ideas, and listening to your friends and neighbors is paramount. And so with that, we'll open up to questions.
Thank you, panel. We'll start with one of our anonymous questions, which is, how can parents, teachers, and friends help those who express hate and meanness to understand the consequences of their behavior and get them to put themselves in others' shoes, so to speak?
Whether I understood you right? Did you say that people are asking us to help, or someone is asking in the audience, how to talk to people who are conducting themselves in some way that are hateful and and demeaning to others and how they should change? How do you engage somebody
Yes,
who
that's,
behaves in this manner and doesn't seem to be aware, or maybe not fully aware, of how it affects others? Was that the question? No.
So I've collected this question from a member of this group, and that is how I read it. How, if we see somebody committing a hateful act, how do we engage them to help them see the consequences and
To
change?
see the consequences.
That's
of
how I
that.
read this question.
Yeah. No, I think this was already said in many other ways, but I would find that listening to the person, not approaching the matter with the notion that this is wrong and you will be punished and look at what you have just done, but really find out, like many people now think, that some of the things that have been done here or in other places like damaging the New England Holocaust Memorial or the swastika incidents in the schools, that these children really did not know exactly what they were doing. This is, I understand, is one of the hypotheses, correct? That they are really not fully aware of it. So you cannot definitely respond to it immediately with an attitude, oh, this was wrong, don't do this again, before you heard what the youngster who had done it had thought he was doing. And without kind of, not with an accusatory tone that you already know that this was wrong, but with a genuine interest in what he thought he was doing when he put the swastikas down, but that he knew what the meaning of those symbols were. I don't know if the others would agree with that much too kind of psychiatric way of approaching the problem. But we do believe that indeed it is helpful when with a tone that almost says, okay, you did it, now let me see, what is this about? As if you are not maybe fully aware of what he was trying to say with it. Certainly, to speak in a manner that opens if it was a child, and the opportunity to be open about it and say whatever it was that they thought they were doing. Have you had an actual situation like that? The person who is asking that question, it would be important to know whether such a more open and empathic approach to the problem was actually tried and how it worked. No? Yes.
You don't know, it's an anonymous question.
You did. Oh, so you don't know whether it worked or not. No. But this would be my way of trying to get to the question whether or not the person actually knew what he was doing. About the swastikas, it's very difficult now to know because it is so prevalent and it is no longer only an expression of anti-Semitism, is my impression. And I'm reading about it more and more as if it had become a symbol of hate. So there is so then you can maybe move to the next assumption that you have. Oh, maybe you were angry at somebody, maybe you were really annoyed and you wanted them to know, but you couldn't tell them directly. And this was one way in which you were talking to them. Could that be a way to continue the conversation? That you want to tell the child that this is, and that gives you then an opportunity to say that maybe he wasn't fully aware, but others will look at it and say, oh, there is somebody very angry at someone. I don't want to speak carry on and pretend a conversation here, but there are so many ways. I think the most important part of this is really how we first approach it. Not with judgment, not with anger, not with, okay, this is terrible, don't do this again, but what did you have in mind?
Yeah, and just to echo Dr. Ornstein, I think that it can be, takes a certain level of comfort to do this, but to ask either that child or that individual, what do they mean by that? What do you mean when you say that statement? If it's an anti-Semitic statement or racist statement, a lot of the times it comes from where Dr. Ornstein says a place of just a lack of knowledge or understanding. And when you push someone to actually think about some of the things that they say in that way, they realize pretty quickly how foolish and awful it makes them look. Another sort of avenue that you can take is to educate people where the sort of genesis of these slurs and these sort of statements come from. So, if it's something where somebody is referring to somebody as being a Jew in a derogatory way and saying, oh, well, that actually comes from, this whole, Jews, being forced to be the money lenders and sort of the negative stigma that came with that led to real harmful repercussions for people in real life. That can be sort of an eye-opening experience for some people, but again, it takes sort of an understanding of that background and a willingness to step out and have that conversation with the person.
I think the last thing that I would add is that the one thing that you all have who are here is the power to stand up and say something in a situation like that. And you can say it with kindness and compassion, right? And you can say it with curiosity and asking what's next, inquisitiveness rather than accusation. But you have the power to stand up and be what's next in that conversation instead of shutting that conversation down or allowing it to persist in silence. So if you allow something to be said that's hateful and then you don't counter it in some way, it can be assumed that you agree with it, right? And so if somebody you love or somebody you care about says something next to you that you don't agree with, you can say, it makes me really uncomfortable that you said that. And that's all you have to say, right? And then then the person who's sitting next to you can think, oh, well, I've just made my friend or my family member uncomfortable.
Can I ask maybe? I find that many a times, especially high school age children, 16, 17, they are now listening to many various voices. What they hear maybe in their homes and from some other friends is contrary to what they hear at school from you or people who are trying. And it creates tremendous conflict and difficulty for these youngsters. And I think it causes, and I speak to you, I don't remember anymore. You were the last person speaking. No, Jamie. Yeah. That here the school is making all these efforts, They are listening to survivors and they are doing this and that, all kinds of exercises. And then at home, it says, oh, these are all these, what are they called, these extreme leftists, you are being brainwashed. You have to consider the perspective that we have developed in our lives, and it's not the same as what you hear in the school. And I think that this is one of the issues that I sense may be underlying many of the failing efforts that the schools. You are shaking your head. You are shaking your head as if you agree with me. Yeah, because it's not so simple that this child as an individual alone is carrying that. He is now he's listening to this, listening to that. It's very hard for him to know where he stands. And I think that when we then just put it all on the kid who did the act, we are not considering all the varieties of influences that they are now exposed to, what they hear and what they read.
Let me take the next question.
Got one right here?
Battles everywhere.
My question is, how can teens today combat racism and bigotry ourselves? I mean, how can we hold other kids more accountable?
One of the things I mentioned in my remarks is teaching our students, our children, to be more of an upstander. An upstander is someone that stands up for when they see something that isn't right. It's very difficult for students to find their voice, and we need to create those safe spaces for them to learn how to become upstanders and to support those students that may be picked on or bullied or for harassed or for whatever other reasons. So that's where those different activities, such as role-playing or reading books or participating in coursework such as Facing History, where you are taking a look at different situations and you're having discussions on how can we not let this happen again? How can we not let this repeat as it did in the past? So that's the type of thing we need to do a better job of, as I mentioned in my remarks.
I think combating racism begins with each one of us, right? So I'm white, and I know that combating racism is not, that's not on my brothers and sisters of color, that's not on my siblings of color, that's on me, right? So every day I have to ask myself, what have I done today to make my impact, my negative impact on my siblings of color less today? What have I done today to make myself more of an impact, or I'm more of an ally to my siblings of color? So I have to look at my own privilege, I have to examine myself, I have to ask myself those questions every day. And so I think combating racism, whether you're a teen, whether you're my age, whether you're the age of my beloved sister over here, happens inside each of us, right? And so it's not necessarily about going to a march every day, it's not necessarily about joining another group, although those things might be things that you do. It's about asking ourselves those hard questions and finding other people around you who are also willing to ask those hard questions of themselves, because not everybody is, right?
If I might also add to that, yesterday I was at a meeting with a bunch of police officers from, sorry, is this better?
Yes.
Yesterday I was at a marijuana meeting with some police officers from Colorado. I swear I didn't inhale. And the thing that really surprised me was a comment that one of the officers made about his daughter. And when he said, "Come on, I know you've used it," she kept insisting, "No, I didn't." And she gave all the healthy reasons. She was a dancer and so forth. And at the end, he could barely say it. He was so emotional. She said to me, "I would have hurt your feelings, and I could never do that." I would suggest that in order to communicate with teens, first talk to your parents. If you have a good relationship with your parents, rely on your parents to help you out with a difficult situation like that. This is a wonderful town with lots of very supportive families. In that regard, Reading is very, very lucky. Talk about difficult issues. I certainly encourage it with your peers, but also rely on your parents as a resource.
This was my unsaid comment earlier, that you have the parents, you have the home, and the question is, first, in terms of what happened at the memorial, I don't know how many of you know there were 2 incidents. You know about that. And the school was actually, I think, somewhat reluctant to identify, and it's very difficult to say. So what did you have in mind when you did that, or whatever it was? But it was very clear. We had a meeting afterwards. I don't know if some of you may have known about it, but about 2 weeks ago, the mayor of Boston and the mayor of the town where the youngster goes to school were there. But the youngster, that group of youngsters who were involved did not come to the meeting. That would have given them a chance and us a chance to look at this. And this is where I feel I am a little bit worried. What is it that we can do in the schools, and with all the good intent? I just loved your presentation and what you people are doing in this area. It's really very, very impressive. It would be very good to know how effective we can be in view of all the other forces that are bearing down on a young person's mind.
And I think that's one of the great things about the World of Difference Club, which actually takes the opportunity to train kids from a broad swath of the school to come together and have some of these conversations and be sort of the leaders within the community. A lot of these incidents that we are seeing, and I don't want to speak for Superintendent Doherty, but he may agree with this as well, but they're not happening during class when the teacher's present. It's happening before school, on the bus, after school, during lunch, in the locker room, on the athletic field. That's when these sort of incidents are happening. And so making sure that there are people that will be bystanders and upstanders that are willing to address that sort of thing, I think speaks to your question as well in terms of how can you combat racism, anti-Semitism, and hate by being that upstander when there isn't necessarily an adult figure around and being that leader yourself.
Thank you for the opportunity to attend this forum this evening. I'm new to Reading. My husband and I just moved here in March.
Just closer to your mouth. Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity to attend this forum. My husband and I are new to Reading. We moved here in March. We don't have children in the school system, but embracing diversity is a very important topic to us. So here I am this evening. Picking up on the idea that children are social learners. Children learn by watching adults. They rely on adults for support. We've been talking about that a little. I was struck by the superintendent's long list of very important programs we're putting in place in the school system for children. I was also struck by the comment that there was a public forum and there was some discourse that may have got out of control. I'm wondering if there are some techniques that could be used in public forums where there's some debate so we can learn how to have civil debate and respect each other's opinion, where maybe there's opportunity in adult settings to have a more tempered discussion that allows people to see the diversity of opinions. And through that, our children will see that there are ways to embrace diversity. Can anyone comment on what techniques could be used in settings where adults gather together to share opinions?
Good evening. So, quite honestly, common sense would be the best thing I can tell you, because we've had some real issues in general with people just don't respect each other, and I don't understand that. You can't listen to other people's opinions without listening to them, and not having to share the same opinion, but at least to hear what the other person has to say. And quite honestly, I think if people just took a step back and actually thought about what they were saying, or what the other person had to say, people could get along a lot easier in this town, this community.
One of the things that's happening now compared to when I was a youth many years ago is the world is moving so much faster now. It's a soundbite world, and unfortunately the art of listening is almost gone entirely. People feel like they have their 10 seconds to express their opinion, and that's all they're going to get, so they do. I was taught at a very early age that the reason I have 2 ears and 1 mouth was so that I could listen much more than I could talk. And honestly, I don't think people understand that anymore. I think there's a lot more people that are interested in talking and telling you their opinion and really don't have a lot of interest in listening to anything. So it's a very delicate balance, because you want to be very respectful of people and you want to listen. But listening is a two-way job, quite honestly. If you're going to have an actual conversation with a person, both sides need to be willing to listen and both sides need to be willing to talk, and no one should be in a big hurry.
You asked for a technique. There are many, but these techniques then are used with the same group over and over again, because you actually have to learn how to keep within that kind of a limit. I will mention one that has been around for a long time in my field, in psychiatry, psychoanalysis. It developed in England, and so it's named after the place where it was developed, Tavistock, the Tavistock method. And what they do is that they have a leader, but he or she is also kind of under certain constraint, time constraint. But there are 3 round circles. People sit in 3 circles, and the first time around, depending how much time you have for this conversation, the first time around, only the inner circle will be able to talk. However, there are these 2 other circles that will listen. They have no voice. They cannot now interact. They are made to listen, okay? And then, whatever, because they are asked to respond, but only to what they heard, and that is also limited in time. I don't remember, maybe 2 minutes for each person or whatever time element there. And so it goes around in order to get a third into the first one. Now they are outside, but they become the ones who can give their opinion, and the others have to listen and to respond. In other words, people have been struggling with this question of how to communicate with each other meaningfully when we are of different opinions. Because it's easy to speak to the like-minded people. You have to develop a technique. So I was interested in your question. Is there a technique? Yes, but these are, as I would say, professional techniques that develop over time, and then people have to adhere to these particular rules. They are extremely productive. This particular technique has been in use since the Second World War, I would say, at least. It was so successful, and people get trained in it, and then they train other people, and eventually large communities can work their way through certain fundamental disagreements regarding whatever the disagreements happen to be.
And that's the thing, right? These are practices, and that's what we're hoping that that we're starting here tonight, a practice of us being together and being in relationship with one another. And so I welcome your question, and I hear it as a suggestion that we move forward in dialogue with one another, and that we start learning how to be more civil and more understanding, more respectful with one another. And I would welcome your participation in helping us understand how to do that. Next question.
We have a number of questions on cards, so we have any number to get through. If we want to get through all of the ones that even got put in the baskets, so we're going to try and
panel, let's be brief.
Yeah, move along a little. The next question that we have is for our town manager, Mr. LaLasher. Bob, Dr. Doherty has talked about the initiatives that they're taking to do ADL training with administrators and staff in the school district. Is the town working on a similar initiative for town leadership and staff?
Yes, we are. And first, let me turn it over to the police chief to give you the best answer.
So in the police department, for people that don't know, we have one of 7 departments that are accredited in the state, which means we follow, there's 257 standards and policies that we have to follow to stay accredited. And one thing we did last year, we were one of 2 departments that, through President Obama's procedural justice training, we had an 8-hour training for every single entire employee in my department, civilian and sworn personnel, on practice of procedural justice, which came after Ferguson and the Baltimore officer-involved shootings that President Obama put into place. And as well as, we personally have a civil rights violation policy and bias against bias policy that every year we have to, as a department, go through and retrain on every year. As well as I've been in touch with Norman about bringing out the ADL for our specific department to do an 8-hour training for our department as well.
Excuse me. Thank you, Chief. Additionally, senior staff, department heads, assistant department heads routinely go to professional development. And this is just one of many topics, but as an example, I mentioned going to the Race, Justice, and Use of Force meeting last week. Interestingly, I was joined, in addition to one of the police lieutenants, which makes sense, I was joined by the town accountant and the treasurer. Those are things you normally wouldn't associate with those positions and those responsibilities. So we do take the issue seriously. We try to spread the information across the department as best we can. We can't spend all day at professional development, though. We do have responsibilities. But we do take the issue seriously. And I think, quite frankly, in town government, if you will, the police department is the most important group to be well-trained in this issue, and they are.
I'm a 7th grader at Coolidge, and I would like to know, can social media influence hate speech?
Yes, absolutely. I think that with the proliferation of social media, you see a lot of people being able to hide behind anonymity. It allows people the opportunity to feel like they can say whatever they want to say. If you look on social media right now, it would take me less than 3 seconds to find something that would be probably offensive to each and every person in this room, and that is just a function of how social media works, unfortunately. There are a lot of things that you can do individually in terms of reporting content to the provider. If you see something that's especially heinous, or definitely if it's threatening, reporting it to Chief Segala or to the police. That is also incredibly important. Any sort of threat should absolutely be reported to the police if you feel unsafe. And also we have, and I can provide to folks that are here on the panel, cybersecurity guidelines for how to report this sort of stuff and sort of what the different terms and conditions of posting on different sites are, so that if people are interested in that, that's something that can be made available to familiarize yourself with.
Hello, thank you for being here around the area. I was going to ask, when I'm thinking of what's going on, do you think that at school when we seem to stress STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and as a town meeting member we've heard that and we know that we need it to be in the 21st century, but do you think that we're not giving enough to English, history and social studies, ethics, government, that's where maybe some of it you hear sometimes people talk about they don't know what the Holocaust is, or World War II is something that's not understood. And this is not meant as a criticism of the school, so please don't take it that way. I don't mean it that way. But I'm thinking the idea of ethics or allowing somebody to speak. I mean, we all know there are topics I don't discuss even with close friends sometimes. We don't broach them. Maybe that's not the right thing. We don't know how to handle it when we end up getting into an argument. But just a thought that in literature where maybe you're reading and then you discuss issues, what comes up in that book, and you try to understand it and see how the characters are, and maybe you gain an understanding of how to work through things. So just a thought.
Ron, thank you. I appreciate that feedback. We are always constantly looking at our curriculum and how we can make it more diverse, first of all, but also to give students the skills necessary to be able to have those types of discussions that you're referring to. I do want to reassure you that we just don't do STEM all day long. We also do English and social studies as well. So there are a lot of opportunities in our classrooms to engage in those discussions. A couple of things that I did mention already this evening that I think fit right into what you're talking about is the facing history in our SELS curriculum that we put in this year at the middle school, and that we have had at the high school. Those are, that's a very powerful program that takes a look at the past and how we can learn from lessons in the past, and our students have already started benefiting from that. So thank you for the feedback.
We're going to take one more question. Liz?
All right, so this is an anonymous question, probably best for Pastor Jamie, if you could answer briefly. Please explain the idea behind Reading Embraces Diversity. Is it a statement, a wish, a command, or just what?
I love that question. Statement, wish, not a command. We can't, I heard lots of folks say this year, we can't mandate, we can't legislate what is in people's heads and what is in people's hearts. And those people are absolutely right when they say that. We can't legislate or mandate what is in other people's heads and what is in other people's hearts. But I have a hope and I have a confidence that this community can be stronger and healthier and more respectful than I have seen us be over the last few months, right? I have seen places where we have been downright nasty to each other, when we have yelled at each other, when we have failed to listen to one another's stories with respect and honor. I have seen places in social media and in person where we have treated each other really disrespectfully. And I've seen the ways that those kinds of interactions have led to our devaluing of one another's humanity. And when we see each other treat one another that way, and when our kids see us treat each other that way as adults, right? We are teaching our children and we are teaching ourselves that those things are okay. And when we say nothing about it, when we let all of those things happen in a vacuum, we're saying all that is fine. And what we're saying here tonight, and what those of us who have gathered here to form Reading Embraces Diversity are saying, is that it's not fine. And what we would like to do is for us to learn how to be more civil, be more respectful with each other. Not because it's a nice thing to do, but because we belong to each other. As human beings, as citizens of this country, and as people who live in this town, we belong to each other. We live next door to each other, we share the same resources, we share the same town, and we belong to each other. And therefore, when something happens to you that hurts you, it impacts me. And so I need to know what's going on in your life. I need to know the things that hurt you and impact you. And likewise, you need to know that about me. So we have to know how to talk to each other and how to say things to each other without hurting each other, even when those things are hard, right? And that takes practice and it takes listening. And it means that we're gonna have to do all sorts of events together, and some of those events are gonna be fun, and some of those conversations are gonna be hard. But I hope that you will join us on that journey. And so I want to thank you all so much for,
Jamie,
yes.
Just before you go on,
Yeah,
we want to acknowledge that we have about 11 questions that were turned in on cards that weren't answered. And so we want you to understand that your questions are important and that we really will get to them. Because some of them are profound and raise really important questions for us to get to in the long run. So just a word to all of you all, many of you who put in questions that we haven't been able to get to. Thank you for your questions, and please note that we're going to try and address these in subsequent events, and also to talk about them in small groups and in other ways. Please keep asking these questions, and if you're not hearing answers, please pass them again and again, so that we are hearing them and you're feeling like you're heard and getting answers. Thank you.
We are volunteers. Some folks up here are staff and our town officials, and so I encourage you to engage them in all the ways that you do. But those of us at Reading Embraces Diversity are volunteers in our positions there, and so I would encourage you to have a little patience with us there. So I want to thank you all so much for coming out tonight and for treating each other's questions and stories with respect here tonight. This has just been a wonderful event, and so I want to thank you. And before the choir leads us in our closing song, I want to let you know how you can continue this conversation beyond tonight. And I think there's going to be some information that comes up behind me here. So first of all, if you didn't sign in with your name and email when you arrived, I encourage you to do that on your way out. We promise not to send you a ton of emails. We just want to let you know when important things like this are happening. Second, who has a smartphone? I want you to take it out right now. Open your Facebook app if you have it. Don't yell at somebody else, but find Reading Embraces Diversity and like the page. That's the #1 way to stay up to date with what we're doing right now. We'll drop some updates from this event, including answer maybe the questions that we didn't get a chance to answer tonight, and set some dates for future meetings right there on that page. And as always, you can email us at readingembracesdiversity@gmail.com. We know that hate and bias don't end in a night. It takes a long time, and it takes culture change, and it takes us knowing each other. And so we have lots that we want to do. We're thinking like interfaith holiday celebrations, film series, and book groups, and field trips, and speaker series, and intergenerational story time at the library. We have so many ideas, and we want to hear yours too. So if you want to be a part of that fun, and if you have ideas of your own, there are idea pages outside in the lobby that you're welcome to write your ideas on, and we want to hear from you. With your help, I know that we can build a stronger and a healthier and a more respectful Reading. And as I mentioned before, please mark your calendars for November 29th when Dr. Ornstein will be back with us. And I want you to check the Red Facebook page for updates on that event. So thank you again to everybody who made this event possible this evening, especially to the staff of RMHS and the mixed choir for being here so late on a school night. Thank you guys so much, and we're going to leave this place in a spirit of hope and peace, and so the choir is going to lead us in a song together.